I have an amazing, beautiful, bright, sassy, cute 2-year-old daughter. She is, obviously, one of my favourite people in the world, but she's a toddler. And when it comes to things, I will gladly take advice from her about whether or not it's time for her and her sister to paint my nails, whether it's time for us to play dress-ups or it's time for us to play in the cubby house in the backyard. I don't take too many advices about federal politics from my toddler. But there are plenty of companies who fall into the pressure of toddlers in their 20s. Toddlers who, if they don't get what they want, they fall to the ground like they're in the middle of a shop and they didn't get the lolly that they want, and they kick and they scream. Because you see, what a toddler does is when they have no other words, they make as much noise as possible until eventually a parent, in their mind, will eventually relent and give them exactly what they want. And depending on what sort of a parent you are, sometimes you give in, sometimes you fight back, sometimes you just walk away. But generally speaking, you don't give in to the toddler, because if you give in to the toddler, they will be, well, aware that that's the only way the world works. If it doesn't go the way that they want and they don't get exactly what they want, you scream as loud as possible, and then eventually you get what you want because people don't want to hear the noise anymore. Perhaps I'm over-torturing this metaphor, but there are plenty of toddlers who exist around Australian politics, and there are no greater examples of it than those in their late teens and early 20s, maybe even into their 30s, who are the Greens toddlers. These are the toddlers who scream, bitch, moan, complain, protest, get in the way, gum up the system, cause as much trouble as possible until Daddy gives them what they want, until Mummy eventually gives in and says, that's okay, they're there. Would you like some quinoa? Well, today, green toddlers have won. There is another company here in Australia that has decided to, for no real good reason, give in to loud toddlers who have been screaming because they have a tangential connection to the Adani coal mine. The company is the Greyhound Bus Company. Now, the Greyhound Bus Company was doing a disgraceful act of transporting workers from cities to work sites. God forbid it was taking people from the place that they rest between work days to go and do their work. But this campaign has been growing for some time, and even a bloke who had some connection to the Greyhound Bus Company, well, he got booted off a committee that cared about the Great Barrier Reef because he works for a company that moves workers to what will eventually become a mine that they believe will be the single determinant as to whether or not the Great Barrier Reef exists or not. Green toddlers. This was the statement that the Greyhound Bus Company put out today. Now, they will continue doing it for another couple of months, but then when that contract is done in March, they will give in to the sooks. Greyhound Australia has received numerous messages, emails and phone calls from people expressing their thoughts both for and against. How many do you reckon we're going for? The Carmichael Rail Network and the Adani Carmichael project. We continue here. Following considered deliberation in the best interests of our staff, customers and partners, Greyhound Australia has decided not to enter into a contractual arrangement with BMD to service construction of the Carmichael Rail Network beyond our preliminary 31 March 2020 commitment. You see, this is how it works. Because people have got not a lot to do if they don't have a job, they sit around and send form letters. They're often constructed by somebody in Sydney or Melbourne, and then they bombard these inboxes of any company to do with Adani. They also jump on the phone lines until eventually no one can make a call into the very companies that they are going after. Like toddlers, they protest at the front of these companies until they give them what they want, which in this case was to not take workers to the work sites to build the infrastructure that leads to the mine that creates billions of dollars in revenue for the state government that in part goes to pay for all of the things that those toddlers demand government spends more money on. What is their idea to replace the billions of dollars that mining creates to, say, the Queensland economy. What, a millionaire's tax? What do they think that they will be able to replace it with? Their answer is nothing. They don't care. And they do all of this stuff from afar, because when they physically go and see the people of Queensland, like they did during the election campaign, they're given, quite rightly, the middle finger by those who say, "Bugger you," who decided to have a holiday telling me how I should live my life. Well, now they don't have to get in their convoy of a lack of courage. They don't have to be led by the chief Ewok, among others, Bob Brown. These people do it in their undies, on their mobile phone. And sadly, it's something that they are planning to do a whole lot more often, because just like as a toddler who you give into their bad behaviour, Greyhound Australia has rewarded them for this behaviour. This is the stuff that we're talking about. This was back in August last year. Anti-Adani activists now targeting contractors, anyone to do with anything to do with the mine, the things leading to the mine, the technology that serves the mine, and it reads like this. After exhausting virtually all legal options. So remember, that's the rules of the road. We have a dispute between two people. It eventually is adjudicated by the law of the land, but they just go around it now. And these people have now activated a second part of their public relations strategy. It's not a PR strategy. It, of course, is a bullying strategy, where they target contractors who may be doing work for the Indian energy giant. What do? Some agitators have even been ringing private mobile numbers of chief executives in the early hours of the morning, including the AFR rich lister, John Wagner, whose current cement quarry in Townsville has been targeted by protesters. This has worked before. This was a story from August in 2019 when this program first started, where contractors said, "That's it, we give in, we're done." There are companies, though, who do still have balls, and most of them exist overseas. SIEMENS is a German technology company, and they turned around and said, no. As their chief executive wrote in a letter, "My obligation is to the shareholders, and my obligation to the shareholders is to make sure that we service the contracts of people that we get into bed with. That customers should be serviced, not the people who aren't the customers of these businesses." And by the way, if you think this is just about the Adani coal mine, it's not. Lefties are trying to go after airlines, because airlines are the way that people are sent home after their refugee claims fail in this country. Thankfully, because there's only two major Australian airlines who actually continue that work, they're not able to get the same result that they've been able to get out of a bloody bus company. Think about this when you use your purchasing dollar, because the same tactics are being used against Sky News every day, where people who don't watch the channel, don't even know what happens on the channel, respond to the dibber-dobbers who make up what happens on the channel. The reality of the Adani coal mine is that, apart from the fact that it will help lift people out of poverty by getting electricity to parts of India, if you want a world-class health system in Queensland, if you want the police to turn up when you call 000, if you want air conditioning in your schools, it has to be paid for by someone. And largely, that in part is the mining industry. They pay it through resources tax, and they pay it through company tax. They pay it through payroll tax, and they pay it in a million other ways. So be a good citizen, be a good parent, ignore the toddler, because they'll only get worse if you give in to them like Greyhound did today.